I thought I'd seen everything money could buy, until I saw the woman I paid six figures to care for my son, asleep on the floor like a ghost from another life. That night changed everything I thought I knew about people and myself. They say grief has a way of turning billionaires into believers, and I never truly understood what that meant until the night I walked into my son's bedroom and saw her lying there, not beside him, not on the bed I'd furnished with memory foam and hotel-grade linens, but curled on the floor like she belonged to the shadows. Before we dive in, if you believe that the most powerful acts of love come from the quietest corners, the ones no one sees, not even when they're being paid to care, then hit that like button and subscribe to follow the rest of this story. Because sometimes, the richest thing you can do is listen closely when the world falls silent. My name is Christopher Sterling, founder of multiple companies, featured on the cover of Forbes twice, once for a tech IPO, once for a viral quote I don't even remember saying. I'm not here to brag. I'm here because, for all my accolades, I couldn't stop a disease from burrowing into my son's heart. Ethan, 6 years old, smile like his mother's, lungs too weak for a game of tag, heart too delicate for a future I once planned down to the university he'd attend. After Meredith passed, my world collapsed into two obsessions: keeping Ethan alive and keeping Ethan from knowing I was breaking. Enter Alina Reyes, a caregiver with a resume that read like a medical fantasy novel, Johns Hopkins, neonatal intensive care, pediatric certifications I had to Google to understand. When she interviewed, I remember thinking she didn't sell herself well. She was too quiet, too deferential, too careful. But Ethan took to her instantly. And after 3 failed hires who quit by week's end, I was desperate enough to say yes. For the first few weeks, things were smooth, clinical even. She kept her distance, slept in the penthouse guest suite, showed up each morning in those soft-soled white shoes like she floated in and out of the apartment on air. Ethan's vitals improved. He laughed more. He stopped asking about mommy's voice in the night. I thought that was the story. Rich man hires miracle woman. The end. Until I came home early. I'd caught the red eye from San Francisco after closing a deal that had netted me more in a day than some country's GDP. The elevator chimed open at 2:47 a.m., and the first thing I noticed was the silence. Not just the hush of a sleeping household. No, this was different. Stillness, yes, but laced with tension, like a held breath. I passed through the kitchen, past the sleek granite island no one used anymore, and turned down the hall toward Ethan's room. His door was ajar. The nightlight, shaped like a crescent moon, painted soft shadows across the carpet. I stepped closer, expecting to see Alina perched in the reading chair. She often stayed late if Ethan had a rough night. But the chair was empty. Then I saw her, Alina, on the floor, curled on her side like a child beside his bed. One arm bent under her head, the other resting near Ethan's mattress. She wasn't faking sleep. I could tell by the depth of her breathing, the surrender of her posture. She hadn't just dozed off. She'd chosen to be there. Ethan stirred, his hand dangling over the bed's edge, fingertips inches from her shoulder. I didn't move for what felt like hours. She had a room. A suite with a view of the East River, private bath, more square footage than the apartment I grew up in. She had access to a closet full of plush blankets, orthopedic pillows, all the accoutrements of luxury I prided myself on offering. But none of it mattered. She was here, on the floor. No fanfare, no complaint. The next morning, I watched from the kitchen as she entered, hair neatly tied back, eyes bright, voice cheerful as she greeted Ethan. No mention of the night before. No fatigue. No sense of having sacrificed anything at all. So I checked the security feed. 26 nights. That's how many I counted. 26 recordings of her tucking Ethan in, waiting until he fell asleep, then laying herself down beside him. Always on the floor. Never on the daybed I'd installed. She'd sleep there for a few hours, rise before dawn, and start her day as though nothing had happened. I didn't confront her. Not immediately. Instead, I found myself watching her more closely. The way she handled Ethan's medications like ritual. The way she responded to his questions with patience most mothers would envy. The way she listened, really listened, to every joke, every worry, every offhand musing he muttered between 4 flushes and bedtime stories. I realized, and this shamed me, that she knew my son better than I did. I'd been busy building empires. She'd been sleeping on carpet to stop a child from crying in the night. And that's when the question started. Why was someone with her credentials working as a live-in caregiver for a grieving billionaire? Why did she sleep on the floor instead of the bed? Why did she never ask for time off, or a raise, or even her own privacy? I was no stranger to secrets. You don't survive the cutthroat climb of Silicon Valley without learning that every resume hides something. But Alina's secret didn't feel like a liability. It felt like a scar, and I had to know the story behind it. Because something told me that the woman sleeping on my son's floor wasn't doing it out of obligation. She was doing it out of memory, of someone she once lost. Maybe even the reason she was here at all. And the truth, when I finally learned it, would shake me harder than anything Wall Street ever could. She never told me why she slept there, not until I saw the scar, not until her silence finally cracked wide open. It started with the scar, not a dramatic thing. No jagged line down her face or dramatic limp like you'd find in some war story. No, this was subtle, a thin, pale mark on her left wrist, barely visible unless you were looking for it. But I wasn't looking for it. It found me. That morning, I dropped my phone under the breakfast table. When I bent to retrieve it, I caught sight of her arm as she adjusted Ethan's tray, a gesture so casual it might have gone unnoticed on any other day. But there it was, glinting slightly in the sunlight, running like a whisper along her skin. I didn't ask. Not then. But I couldn't stop seeing it. The scar followed me around the apartment like a ghost. In the boardroom, I heard Alina's voice as I was supposed to be reviewing prototype demos. At dinner with shareholders, I found myself wondering how long ago it had been made, and what kind of pain leaves behind such a neat, surgical signature. Eventually, I couldn't pretend anymore. I sat down, pulled her personnel file again, and started digging. On paper, she was clean. Too clean. Her resume listed the right hospitals, the right experience. But the employment dates had odd gaps. One ended abruptly in 2022, then a full year before the next one. I cross-checked credentials. Licenses valid. References glowing. All checked out. But I've built companies on the back of digging past what checks out. So I went deeper. The hospital where she last worked? Quiet scandal 2 years ago. Pediatric ICU. A boy named Luca Reyes, same last name. 8 years old. Died during a routine poor placement surgery. Internal review suggested procedural failure. But the incident was buried. Sealed records. Minimal media coverage. No lawsuits filed. Except one name kept popping up in whispers from nursing forums and redacted hospital board minutes. Alina Reyes. There it was. Her silence had a name. Luca. I closed the file and stared at the screen until the office windows darkened around me. She had lost a child. Recently. And not just lost. Watched him die inside a system that had chewed her up and spat her out without a single headline. I remembered the way she looked at Ethan sometimes. Like he was made of glass, and she was the only one who knew how fragile he truly was. No wonder she slept on the floor. She was mourning and protecting at the same time. The next morning, I tried to speak. To say something. Anything. But she beat me to it. I know you looked me up, she said, softly, not even turning from the counter where she was preparing Ethan's syringes. It's okay. I would have too. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. I didn't mean to. It's all right, she said, finally glancing at me. There are things you deserve to know. We sat across from each other in the quiet stillness of the penthouse's sunroom. Ethan was down for a nap, the city murmuring below us in traffic and horns and the far-off howl of a siren. She folded her hands in her lap like she was about to give testimony. I was an ICU nurse, she began. The kind of nurse who thought she'd seen it all. Until Luca got sick. He was born with a congenital heart defect. It was manageable. Surgeries, checkups. He was brave. So brave. We had a routine. She paused, blinking against the memory. But during a port replacement, something went wrong. I wasn't even on shift that day. I was home, finally sleeping after 2 double shifts in a row. They called me 20 minutes after he coded. He was already gone when I got there. My throat tightened. I said nothing. What could I possibly say? I tried to file a complaint. I knew protocol hadn't been followed. But I was his mother, not just his nurse. So they said I wasn't credible. Accused me of emotional instability. Suggested I step away. A bitter smile tugged at the corners of her mouth. They gave me the option to resign quietly. I took it. I didn't have the strength to fight. Not then. And then she looked at me. And for the first time since I'd known her, I saw everything. Every buried howl. Every sleepless night. Every time she laid down beside Ethan and tried to make the world feel safe again, not just for him, but for the child she couldn't save. I came here because I didn't know how to be anyone's mother anymore, but I knew I could still protect, even if it was someone else's son. The air between us hung heavy, like a glass globe ready to fall. I felt something inside me shift, not pity, not guilt. Respect. Grief had sharpened her, not broken her. And now that I knew the truth, her every silent sacrifice made perfect, painful sense. I don't want you to sleep on the floor anymore, I said quietly. Alina looked away, brushing a tear from her cheek. It's not for me. It's for him. It's what I would have done for Luca. And now you're doing it for Ethan, I said, which means I owe you more than I can ever repay. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. From that day on, everything changed. But neither of us could have guessed what would happen next, when the past she'd buried came knocking again. And this time, I wasn't the only one watching. It happened the way important things often do, quietly, with no grand announcement. Just a knock at the door one rainy afternoon, and a courier envelope stamped from the State Board of Nursing. Alina stood frozen, envelope in hand, as Ethan tugged at her sleeve, oblivious to the weight she carried. I knew what it was before she opened it. I made some calls, pulled some strings. She'd never asked me to, probably never would have. But sometimes giving someone back their name is the only repayment you can offer. Inside was her reinstatement. License fully restored. She sat down at the kitchen island, staring at the paper like it might vanish if she blinked too fast. I thought that part of my life was over, she whispered. I nodded. Turns out some endings just take a little longer to become beginnings. In the days that followed, I saw something change in her. She didn't say much, didn't need to, but her steps were lighter, her silence less heavy. And the night she finally moved from Ethan's floor to the daybed, not the guest room, just a few inches farther from his bedside, I knew she was finally allowing herself to heal. I offered her the choice to leave, to return to her life, her calling. A top position at Mount Sinai was waiting, a way back to the world that had once exiled her. But she surprised me again. I think I found something here I wasn't looking for, she said. A second chance. Not just to work, to belong. And just like that, our roles blurred. Caregiver, father, protector, survivor. We'd both lost too much to take what we had for granted. Ethan began calling her Lena, a slip at first, then a choice. She never corrected him. Months later, on his 7th birthday, he asked if she could stay forever. She looked at me, unsure, waiting for the adult answer. But I didn't speak. I just nodded, because she already had.